with colonization, you had Blavatsky, Bazant, those lunatics. It was the basis of what's now the New Age spiritualism of today. The westernization of Eastern ideas and concepts and the perversion of those ideas and concepts for distinctly Western purposes. They did this for distinctly Western purposes. Oh yes, the West did not just colonize land and bodies and resources. They colonized what cultures considered sacred. They reached into the metaphysical heart of civilizations and extracted whatever they found useful, and they co-opted it. This was a calculated project of epistemic domination and pillage. They took the beliefs of the people that they colonized, they appropriated those beliefs, and they used those beliefs to not only manufacture their own westernized versions, which they would then use for their own purposes. But they also did it to negate and to invalidate the cultural ownership of those beliefs, the ownership by the colonized people. Now, of course, for us, we're just talking about all different types of kufr from all around the world, but that's irrelevant to the point that I'm making here. The point here is that this was just another form of extractive ransacking by the West. And it's important to recognize that. It's important to recognize how they did and what they did and why. From the 18th century onwards, as the Western empires spread across the globe, they encountered civilizations, old civilizations, whose spiritual traditions were older and were deeper and were far more integrated into the fabric of daily life than the hollowed out remnants of post-Reformation Christianity, and certainly more than the secularism of the so-called Enlightenment. We're not just talking about, museum relics or something to be cataloged. They were living, breathing systems of meaning. Systems that had sustained those people, that had shaped their laws, their customs, and governed their ethics for centuries. And again, it doesn't matter that we're talking about kufr here. The point here is that these were deeply rooted systems of interpreting life that had formed across centuries of experience. There's intricacy there, there's scholarship there, there's exegesis there, and so on, developed over vast amounts of time. But the West did not approach these things with any sort of respect, not even with any honest curiosity. That's their superiority complex. It makes them incurably cynical. They don't think anything matters. Instead, they engaged in a systematic project of what you can call spiritual extraction, mining, repackaging, and ultimately distorting those civilizations' knowledge to serve their own ideological and materialistic ends. And it continues until today. Maybe not with the same brute force of colonial armies, but through the subtler and more insidious mechanisms of cultural hegemony, appropriation and corruption, perversion. The Enlightenment didn't just challenge the authority of the church. That's not the only thing it did. It gutted any semblance of spiritual life in the West. And that left them with an existential void, a void that rationality and reason and nationalism couldn't fill. The European elite had long since discarded their own scripture, but they still craved for some sort of metaphysical transcendence, They weren't high enough. They weren't powerful enough. So just like Pharaoh, just like Pharaoh, they wanted their supremacy to be on an even greater level. And as a result of colonization, they turned outward towards the so-called mystic Orient, towards the timeless wisdom of the East, towards the ruins of civilizations that they themselves had ruined and destroyed. Colonial expansion provided them the sort of the perfect pipeline for their spiritual looting. The same British officers who plundered Indian palaces also seized texts in Sanskrit, Hinduism, Buddhism, and so on. The ancient traditions of Egypt, of Persia, India, China, Mesoamerica. They were all treated not as living faiths, but as anthropological artifacts, ready to be reverse engineered, ready to be stripped of their original context, ready to be repurposed for Western consumption. It's really quite grotesque if you think about it. And that's where you really start to see the emergence of Western occultism, like some souvenir that a tourist brings back home to show their friends how well-traveled they are. You know, like these celebrities today getting tattoos in Japanese or in Sanskrit or in Arabic without even knowing what they say. So you had what was called at that time, turn of the century, this Theosophical Society in Europe. I think it was based in the UK. It was founded by someone called Helena Blavatsky, 1875. And it was one of the first sort of organized efforts to really codify this spiritual plunder. And then Blavatsky was followed by Annie Besant and Charles Leadbeater, who was a pedophile.